The story of Oedipus is a classic Greek tragedy that revolves around the life and fate of Oedipus, the king of Thebes. The story begins in his royal city, which is suffering from a devastating plague. King Oedipus, determined to find a solution, seeks guidance from the Oracle of Delphi. He learns that the plague is a punishment for a grave offence committed in the past. Oedipus embarks on a mission to uncover the truth and save his city. He discovers that the previous king, Laius, was murdered on the road to Delphi, and that the killer is unknown. Oedipus vows to find the murderer and bring him to justice. His investigation leads him to the horrible realization that he himself is the unwitting perpetrator of the crime. Being a Greek story, you know it's going to get complicated, so hang on to your souvlakis. Poor old Oedipus was adopted by the king of Corinth as a child, having been abandoned by his biological parents, which just happened to be King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes. They did this because there was a prophecy that predicted the king would someday be killed by their own son, who would then go on to marry his mother. No wonder they got rid of him. Anyway, a shepherd found the abandoned child and brought him to the court of Corinth, where he was adopted by a different king and queen. He eventually gets told by the Oracle of Delphi that he was destined to kill his father and marry his mother, so he left town, assuming the oracle was referring to his adopted parents. But while on the road, during a traffic dispute, not giving way to another king, because, kings don't step aside, Oedipus kills the other guy and carries on down the road. Later on, he even solves the riddle of the Sphinx, which earns him the right to marry the now widowed queen of Thebes, that is to say, the wife of the slain road rage victim. Fair enough, but Oedipus, again, oblivious to the true genealogical situation, marries her, that is to say, his biological mother, Jocasta, who also has no idea that the handsome young groom both killed her husband, in other words, his own father, and is therefore her own son. The revelation of all this unwitting, patricidal incest leads to Jocasta taking her own life in despair and in Oedipus's self-inflicted blindness. He exiles himself from Thebes, and the city is relieved from the plague. The play ends with Oedipus's leaving Thebes, accompanied by his daughter Antigone, who both end up wandering in exile. In Voltaire's version, Oedipus eventually ends up taking refuge in a sacred grove, where he slowly comes to terms with the tragic course of his life. Some of the reasons for the great success of Voltaire's version of the story lie not so much in the linguistic style. Indeed, Voltaire adhered to a rigid, well-established format that would seem boring to many today, but in the subtlety of the content and in its emotional delivery. He introduced a more streamlined and condensed pace compared to earlier adaptations. He also focused on the essential elements of the narrative, emphasizing the tragic conflict and the moral dilemmas faced by the characters. This resulted in a tightly woven plot and heightened dramatic tension. He departed from the traditional interpretation of the myth as a manifestation of divine punishment. Instead, he introduced a more rational and secular interpretation, emphasizing the theme of individual responsibility. Voltaire's Oedipus is a noble character who struggles with his own fate and grapples with the horrible choices he has made. Voltaire infused the play with philosophical themes and searching questions. He explored the nature of human suffering, the limits of human knowledge, and the clash between fate and free will. These philosophical elements elevated the play beyond mere entertainment and engaged audiences intellectually. Oedip also contained subtle critiques of the society of Voltaire's time. He used the tragedy as a vehicle to comment on issues such as corruption, hypocrisy, abuses of power, and the fair responsibility of humans in contrast with that of the gods. He intended to invoke an emotional response from his audience, exploring themes of love, betrayal, guilt, and tragedy, eliciting empathy and compassion for the characters. The emotional depth and intensity of the play resonated with audiences and contributed largely to its success. But he also made a number of innovations, which were controversial for the time, for example, drinking on stage, dying on stage, and even the display of corpses on stage, which was something that was previously considered in bad taste. But Voltaire pulled it off, perhaps because his audience had become increasingly bored and restless with the monotony of other plays then on offer. In any case, weaving themes of uncertainty, moral ambiguity, and sympathy for villains was new in France, and though Shakespeare had pioneered the concept over in England some time before, Voltaire had said that while he admired his similar emphasis on character complexity, he detested what he believed was Shakespeare's weird theatrical inclusions and a brutish pentameter verse lacking in the strict conventions of French structure and elegance. Go figure.